I'm Neil Haley. This is the Total Education Show, and I'm really excited today to talk to you guys. Being on television for the second time, the feedback I have gotten from my friends, family, and everyone about the first television show since maybe 13 years ago, it's really, really exciting to be back doing it again in a format with TV. Radio, for people that don't know me, I do about 8 shows a week in radio, and I'm syndicated on about 80 different stations across the country and heard on 88.3 FM in Pittsburgh Fridays at 4:30. So you can check it out, or WRCT.org, streaming live, the Total Education Hour. So the Total Education Network is everywhere, and what I like about this television show, it's all going to be about helping with solutions. A roundtable discussion discussing certain issues that deal with parents, deal with educators, and also the community in large. And our topic today is parent-teacher conferences. And I know that many teachers out there dread them, but parents as well, because it's a very, very personal thing, especially when it comes to parents. I could see myself when I ever do attend parent-teacher conferences, my wife's able to do it, or I could go show up anytime because my wife teaches at the school I used to teach at, and I know every one of the teachers. It's a very nerve-wracking thing, and I remember when I was a teacher, but I first want to welcome to the program my co-host, Dr. G from AskDrG.com. How are you?
Good, Neil. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited. I really enjoyed last month's conversation. It was fantastic. And now we're going to take people from the community of Pittsburgh, which is really exciting. Taking people from the community of Pittsburgh and nationally as well to talk about national issues with a local feel. And it's always great that you're here. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And our guest, and you helped us get our guest, is Vida. And Vida, you're from Homeworks Educational Consulting. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm excited. And to have the expertise, I want you to tell a little bit about your background for our audience because it's extensive, and I think you really could speak to this topic.
Sure. Well, I started out as a special education teacher here in a public school district. I then worked as a special education supervisor. And through all that time, I was really... I had difficulty with when we came to parent-teacher conferences. When we spoke to parents as a teacher and as an educator and a supervisor, I said, but if only I had some more time with you. So this is an excellent topic. I could go home with you and help you figure out what you can do just a little bit better, tweaking it just a smidge to help your child. So I left the education in the classroom and in the school district, and I started Homeworks Educational Consulting, where I work with families to do just that.
And that's tremendous because, again, you have the opportunity to change a lot more people's lives than just in the classroom. And that's one thing I see as an educator and consultant is the same thing. Getting to the homes, getting to talk to people, help them in the community, and it's great that you're on the show. But looking at first segment, what we want to talk about is to define what a parent-teacher conference is, then the importance of it. And defining a parent-teacher conference, I think I'll point that question first to Vida, and then we'll go with what maybe our definition of it is as well, because we all have different definitions of it.
So I see parent-teacher conferences from both angles. As a former teacher and now working with parents, being a parent myself, I see it as an opportunity to start to continue a conversation that should really be ongoing of how is my child doing, how am I as a teacher doing to educate the child that is in my classroom many hours during the day for the whole year. So I see it as an ongoing opportunity to stay with families to help them figure out where their child is and how to improve what that child is already doing in the classroom.
Well, absolutely. I think that that's great that you put the teacher out there, the teacher point of view, because all teachers need to understand this is a time with the conference, even though it's a short period of time, which we talked about before our recording, that the problem is there's not enough time, but sometimes teachers forget that they can make changes very quickly instead of having to make those 72 phone calls or those 72 emails. If they can really define what the conference is and what to do, their preparation is key. But as I look at things as a parent and a teacher, I see that this is such a great opportunity for everyone to get their child on the same page. It's a team effort. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. G?
It has to be a team effort with our kids and the teachers And I always wonder as a parent, what is it the teacher needs from me, right? For my kid to succeed at school, what do they need?
That's an excellent question. Teachers always want you on board as a parent. They want you to be involved. They want you to come in. Teachers are so happy to see you at those parent-teacher conferences because sometimes those parents who we desperately want to see don't come in. So we desperately want you to come in. We want to hear your side of it. What do you see going on at home from a homework perspective? Is your child having any difficulties? And knowing that you as a parent are there to help makes the team effort much more fluent than if the parent doesn't come in.
And I think that it's good that you're taking on that role of the teacher in this roundtable discussion. I will take the role on as more of the consultant administrator in a way of how I've dealt as an educational advocate, because I'm on another side of things than being the teacher and putting that same point of view out there. But my definition of what a parent-teacher conference is, I think that ultimately it's got to be a way to show where they are now and where we want them to be for the next quarter. I'm very disappointed many schools are eliminating the mandatory parent-teacher conference past the second quarter. I think they should have at least 2, possibly 3, because there's always an opportunity for growth. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And those conferences are so important to check in, to see what's going on, to share with the parent of what is your child doing in school. Teachers have them in school for such a long period of time, and there's so much that goes on that sharing and communicating back and forth and having that door open is really important.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
As a parent, if I've got a lot to juggle, I have children who are doing different activities, I have work, maybe my partner has work. If my kids' report cards have always been good, their homework seems pretty easy for them, I'm not hearing a lot from the school that there's a problem, does every parent have to go for every kid for parent-teacher conference?
I have to go with yes.
Yeah,
I have to go with yes. It's that extra connection that is being made. It communicates to the teacher you're involved. You are an on-the-ball parent, even though you have a million things to juggle, and that is absolutely the case. Connecting with that teacher, knowing that the teacher has you on his or her team is really important.
When I was a teacher, Dr. G, then I want to kind of go how you feel it's an important thing as well to meet that teacher for the first time, not just an open house and more of a conversation. Is anytime, even if it was a straight A student, I give 4 to 5 tips for that parent so that they're ready for that next teacher. You always can improve. You can't always say, oh, everything's perfect. When I hear stories like this of students that have all B's or maybe C's and the teacher says, everything's fine, we'll see you next time. It's happened. It truly has happened. So Dr. G, where would you say the importance of a parent-teacher conference on the parents' end of things? What do you see when those parent-teacher conferences come up for you? How do you respond to it in a way of understanding, not the preparation because that'll be in our next segment, but more about how you define the importance of it?
I think that it's great to hear you say that it matters even if your kids are doing well. And you're saying just showing up for parents, just showing up is a gold star.
Absolutely.
Because I think that as a parent, we rarely get our work as parents validated. Whether we feel it's going well or we feel something's going poorly, here's an opportunity, I think, to talk to another adult who knows our children pretty well by the time parent-teacher conferences first come up. Even if they have a class of 35 or 40 students, they see our children often enough in the course of the week that they are going to either say, yes, he struggles with that here too, or no, this seems to help a lot, or things are going really well. I noticed this strength. Isn't it nice to come in and have someone say something really positive about your kids?
Absolutely. I would have to agree on that note. On a personal note, I went to meet with my son's teacher about something, and she gave me a perspective on my son that I had never seen before.
Yes.
And after hearing her perspective, I said, really? I never thought of it this way. And it sort of changed how I looked at my son at some point in a certain situation based on what she said. It's another member on your kid's team helping your child.
And I hope more and more teachers become more parent educators. The way of educating the parents so that they're successful. I hear stories all the time as a tutoring and consultant. Well, what's going on now? I just don't get what the teachers are doing. I'm so confused. And the recommendation I give teachers out there is that you need to educate the parents. Your job will be much easier, trust me, if you can educate them, if you can let them know what's going on, what you're doing in the classroom in a very easy way. That's what open house is about, but sometimes parents aren't paying attention till things get bad. I just received 2 phone calls today, and this is a perfect time to do the show because my business is going to explode now because now they see the grades, interims have come out, and by the time this show airs, we'll be right at parent-teacher conference time, and a lot of them are surprised, and that's not, and Vita, I don't think you really think the teacher is doing the right thing if the first time they meet, they find out they're failing.
Oh, absolutely. If a child is having difficulties, that conversation and that door should have been opened a long time ago, because when you get to parent-teacher conferences, you've already been in school for at least six weeks. That's a lot of information that a teacher has. So if a child's been struggling for 6 weeks, you as a parent should already know that something's going on, and that parent-teacher conference is an opportunity to really have a face-to-face conversation about what you can do to help your child and what the teacher's doing in the classroom to support that as well.
And because teachers have so much on their plate, I don't feel bad. I'm not upset with you, but yet make your life easier. Don't make it so that the conference where you're so stressed, and I know hopefully you haven't dealt with that yet, Dr. G, but it's a really an awkward situation when the teacher and the parent are just at odds with each other.
Or the parent's coming in and they're being slammed with, your child is getting straight D's or failing, and the parent has no idea, and it's hard, how from a parent's perspective, it's very hard to hear that for the first time at this conference.
And it's especially hard, I know we'll talk about more the specifics of the nitty-gritty of being involved in a parent-teacher conference. It's very hard not to go on the defensive.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
And this is where a lot of teaching I'll provide as an educational advocate. I could teach exactly how we need to handle a meeting. Vita can do it.
Yeah,
and then you can talk about your perspective, how you were successful as a parent in that situation, and in learning about from research and things like that. Now, how would you feel if I was the teacher and I told you, by the way, your son's failing every subject? What would be your response to that, and you never received anything, and it's been about 8 weeks, 7 weeks into the school year?
Well, I think that you have an immediate reaction of denial and anger and kind of a lashing out. And so it probably doesn't serve teachers well at all for them to have not given a heads up to parents beforehand. So at least the parent can have a minute to take that in and know what questions they want to ask, to be able to call their own friend and freak out, or their own partner and freak out, and not have the freak out during your 10-minute conference.
So customer service is one thing I think needs to be in every teacher education course. I think that when you're going to become a teacher, you need to learn how to
have a parent-teacher conference.
Exactly.
If sometimes beginning teachers aren't schooled in this, you're just sort of thrown in there. Hi, it's parent-teacher conferences. You have 30 children to go through and meet parents possibly for the first time, and you haven't been given a script of sorts of how to deal with different situations. So it's absolutely a need.
So Vita, we're going to have to take a break, but I really want to have you back on the radio show to just maybe provide tips for teachers. We are working now with Carson DeLosa, and it's very, very great opportunity that we're dealing with just educating teachers, because teachers need educated as well, not just parents, not just everyone in the community. Teachers need to learn.
Yes.
So when we get back, we're going to talk about preparation on the parents' end. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a challenge because there's a lot to do, but it's going to be so rewarding after that 10, 15-minute conference is over. We'll be back in just a moment.
In 2011, the CDC reported that 20% of the U.S. population contracted the flu.
So do one thing this year. Get a flu shot. It can save your life as well as others.
For information on flu shots, contact Tri-Community South EMS.
We're back to Total Education with Neil. Television. This is just, I'm still trying to get used to this. I mean, I wish I could do this, and Dave, you don't want to hear this. I'd like to tape 4 hours, and you're going to look at me and say, oh, come on, that's my producer who's doing such a fantastic job, because when it comes to the camera, the mic, I just love it, and especially when I get to educate. And so far, we are having a great roundtable discussion with Dr. G and Vita, and we're learning about the specifics of the parent-teacher conference. We defined it, the importance of it, but now here comes where you're not going to find this on the internet many places. You're not going to see a television show dedicated to this. This is the preparation. And I'm telling you, the lack of preparation. We're not going to go into the teacher end as much, Vita. We really want to go into the parent end. This is something we definitely need to get as a podcast, the teacher end. But as a parent, how do we prepare for the conference? And I'm going to ask Dr. G specifically, because I can forget with your children, but also in your research of talking to parents, what you think is important in the preparation. So let's first go to Vita. How should a parent prepare for a parent-teacher conference?
Well, I hope that parents come with questions, specific questions, not general questions of how is my child doing. That's very general.
Very vague, yeah.
But really specific questions. Your child has already come back to you with homework that they've brought back, spelling tests, math tests, work that has been sent home. If you have questions on that, you should come in with questions specifically about math, specifically about reading. If you're concerned about their social emotional component in school, you should ask, how is my kid doing on that playground?
That's great.
Those are specifics that parents, I look forward to seeing those when parents would come in, because it helps the teacher to guide that conversation.
And I think teachers need those questions.
Yes.
Because they have so many kids. Just think if you're going to have a conference of 30 to 40 kids in one day. It's scheduled throughout the day. I remember I would start at 8 a.m. and end at 8 o'clock at night when I was at St. Agnes. And it was just bam, 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 next kids, next kids, next kids. And when I listened with my partner, I was listening to the same answers every time. I'm like, no. What we need to do as teachers is look at specifically each child and not just want to rush through. Because the parents want to rush the conference sometimes, and the teacher wants to rush that conference. So, Dr. G, I guess we're going to learn more about you in a way. And how many parent-teacher conferences have you attended on your own, or are your kids still not?
Oh, that's a lot of math.
That's a lot of math.
So far, so let's not count preschool conferences.
Yes.
Although I would just briefly like to ask you, is it really necessary to go to a parent-teacher conference for a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old?
Yes, I would go with 100% yes, because they're developing their early basic skills, and you can catch a lot of problems at that age range and help right then and there than waiting for kindergarten.
That's a fantastic point. I really. I mean, as former developmental therapist, birth at 3, I just believe it's the most important in the education system. Anytime you get to talk to a teacher, they're going to give you different eyes, as you said before. But now we're putting you on the spot. Dr. G, what do you do in preparation for a parent-teacher conference?
So I really like this idea of preparing for a parent-teacher conference in theory. It can be really hard to fit it in time-wise. So in the car on the way to your parent-teacher conference, you really want, ideally the night before or the week before, I really suggest 2 things to parents. One is to talk to your partner. Use it as a sounding board, sort of a state of the union. Is there anything you're worried about? What am I worried about? What should we ask specifically about this kiddo at this age? And then also, this is something I started doing after getting blindsided at a parent-teacher conference for one of my children. I ask my children. About a week before, I ask each of my kids, hey,
that's great.
You're off school on Monday because we have parent-teacher conferences. What do you think I'm going to hear from your teachers?
Sure.
I do the same thing because I'd rather go in not having many surprises, and so it's helpful to hear from the child, because I say, your teacher will share with me, please share first. It's very helpful.
Well, and beyond the idea of you don't want to get in trouble with me if I hear something bad that you didn't warn me about, I also love this idea that schools are starting to do a little bit of having kids do self-evaluations.
Right.
They'll be asked to do that when they have jobs, and often they're asked to do it in college. And so I think it's good practice for them also to learn a little bit of self-awareness and insight.
Absolutely. That self-awareness is key, and it's a life skill that we take with us wherever we go, so developing it early is incredible.
And I think the difference now in a parent-teacher conference is because of the online gradebooks. That really changes a lot of the process. There's not as many surprises most of the time. If your school district doesn't have an online gradebook anymore, that's a mistake.
Yes.
Because it's really become a great tool for the teacher, because the teacher then says, go on to the online gradebook. Even though you talk about time, that's then an issue. So school districts that do have them, a lot of private schools now have them. There's no surprises. You might have already received an interim that's telling you this is where the grade is right now, so you have understanding. That's why creating those questions, what I believe what Vita says, is if you're saying to do it on the car ride, you're giving us that parent way, then this is something that basically we have someone who's going to be the mediator. If dad's in the car and mom's driving, jotting these things down, or even putting them in a voice memo, just so you're kind of rehearsing the kind of questions you're going to ask. So when you get to the meeting, you're ready.
From a teacher perspective, teachers really have about 10 minutes and they have information that they need to share with you, whether it's the principal said you need to share this with the parents or it's district mandated. So probably 5 minutes of that teacher-parent conference is going to be with the teacher providing you with this information that they've been told they need to share. If you come with questions, it's really helpful for the teacher to help guide that conversation.
Exactly.
I'd like to actually to make a plug for an opportunity to teach a little bit more responsibility and resilience to our kids. My kids check their own online gradebook in front of me. At the end of their homework, once every week or so, I log them in to the online gradebook and I ask them to read through, tell me, hey, do all those homework assignments reflect actual homework assignments you've heard of? Because teachers sometimes get a little behind in posting the assignments. And do those grades make sense to you? Do they match up with your understanding of how you're doing? And where do you think you need to improve? What does this say to you?
Exactly, and I think that's all an important thing. So Vita, is there anything else we're missing in this preparation? Dr. G talks about how we have no time, and I agree as well as a parent now, but as a teacher I'd have this crazy, okay, let's have a meeting, set up a parent meeting, let's talk about things, let's jot them down, and then in the car rehearse. That's where I would say things, but what about you?
Absolutely. If you have a question about an assignment, bring that assignment back to school, because then the teacher remembers that assignment so much better and what she wrote for your child rather than talking about that social studies assignment. She, at that conference, having to see 30, 40 parents, may not remember exactly what was written on your child's assignment. If you have a question about specific things, bring those assignments back so you can have a conversation.
I have a question. It seems if I've got 5 minutes to get to the meat of my concerns and to consult this other expert about my child, this other member of the team, do I want to waste time asking about the things that he got wrong on a math test? Or is it only if it's an example of a larger question?
Only if it's an example of a larger question. So what I do as a parent, because I have the teacher background, so there's a formula that teachers follow in conversations with parents when parents come in. So I just say to the teacher, hi, can we get to the meat of it? Because they sort of have a formula to follow. And every teacher that I meet for the first time that year gives me this look, and I go, I've done what you do. Can we just get to the issues that we both have? And they go, oh, okay.
So they're going to skip that part where they say, it's so great to have you in my class this year, and it's so nice to see that he comes in, and then they search for the couple of things that are great. You know, he's always wearing both his shoes on the right feet.
And they're tied.
The good thing, and that's what they're trained to do in ways.
Absolutely, and it's a formula, and it's a way to get comfortable with both the parent and the teacher, and it's necessary in some situations, but if you can get to that meat faster, and the teacher feels comfortable with you, that you're ready to hear that, it really sets up for a good parent-teacher conference.
And in the preparation, when you're having conversations with your kids and then also in the car, what kinds of questions you're thinking about asking? That's where I think it's a great question before, because we're going to get to the next segment, the parent-teacher conference. But what about in the car ride? What kind of questions are you thinking about asking?
That's when I really recommend taking the long view of your child, which is to say, is there a subject in which my child struggles? Is there an area of interpersonal dynamics? You know, does my child have trouble taking correction from authority? Does my child have trouble listening or staying in her seat? Does my child have trouble working as a part of a group? What are the things that you see in 2nd grade or 5th grade or 9th grade that matter in terms of their overall development as a person?
Absolutely. And you have to look at that, and you have to look at what growth and what your goals. And remember, we talked about in the last show.
Exactly.
The goals that we have set forth for our kids, and we have to look at those. And what I would say now, if I was looking at my daughter Ava, I guess her first parent-teacher conference away, but I always, again, I luck out where I can just go and talk to them anytime. But
you skip that formula too. Yes,
I skip that formula too, and I just want to say I at least know what's going on if there's any concerns or certain situations. Based on my schedule, that doesn't work out. And then my wife, in a situation that she teaches at the same school, it's a little bit more of a challenge. And I've always dealt with that in certain ways when I was a teacher, and then their kids went to the same school and they're a teacher. So it was like, we'll have that dialogue. But as a parent, you want to have that dialogue. You want to have that relationship with the teacher like two colleagues have a relationship. Not like, I'm dreading to come because I don't want to talk to the teacher. Because there are a lot of parents out there that have that feeling, like, oh my gosh, that teacher's going to look down at me. That teacher doesn't know what I'm thinking.
Sometimes teachers have that dread too of, oh no, this parent is going to come in and we're going to have a really hard conversation. I don't know if I'm ready for it. So the teacher may have similar feelings, but if you come at it from we're both on the same team, we both really want to help the child that your child is sort of my child. It helps the situation. But teachers may have that perspective as well.
I have the issue that I don't want to spend, for example, I know that one of my children right now is struggling with cursive handwriting. And I don't want to spend the 5 minutes of the meat of our conference with his teacher on cursive handwriting because I don't think it's going to impact him very much as an adult. There are other things I want to hear more about. But if I were to ask about cursive handwriting, we would probably spend the 5 minutes on that.
You could almost acknowledge it, say, I know we're working on it at home, it's a struggle, and then move on to those questions that you really want to talk about, those interpersonal dynamics, if that's
It's the job of the parent to lead the conversation. As an educational advocate, I make sure that I talk to the parents on what questions they want to ask, and I lead and mediate the conference or meeting. The same thing needs to go on with the parent-teacher conference. The parent needs to facilitate this. The teacher needs to, and this is the reason I'm going to say this, because it's a parent-teacher conference, and who cares most about their child? The parent. And I don't know if you disagree with me on that fact, but I think that if the parent has all their ducks in a row and are prepared and ready, it's going to be a pretty easy situation, and the teacher will like that because they're not just bouncing around all over the place.
Well, honestly, I think parents would be thrilled but surprised to hear that the parent should be leading this conversation. Now that you say that, it makes sense to me that open house night, the teacher leads.
Yeah.
And our school very specifically says, please don't bring in a lot of individual questions. That's not what tonight is for. But that I should be in charge. And I have, now that you say that, felt occasionally when we've been sitting at a parent-teacher conference, they do their little spiel and then say, what questions do you have? If I don't have something prepared, sometimes it stalls right there.
Exactly.
Yes,
so there's
absolutely.
this stare like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
how are things going?
He did such a nice job, and his attendance is great.
Yeah,
We're so glad
see,
he
everything's
comes.
fine. Let me look at the clock.
Yeah, we have 2
Yes,
more
we're 2 more
minutes.
minutes.
And then the teacher inevitably says, do you have any more questions? Because they're waiting for your questions. They're waiting for the parent to really lead that. Sometimes parents will come in and they're prepared, but more times than not, they're really not.
Now we're going to go in our next segment and talk about the parent-teacher conference. What to do after you're prepared, what could happen if the teacher's not prepared, or the parent, so that it's an education on every end of things. So when we get back, we're going to talk about that, and I really, really think it's a challenge for parents and teachers, and it's awkward. Any meeting you're in is an awkward thing, especially when you don't know who they are. We'll be back in just a moment.
What are your kids saving for?
Purple eyeshadow and stock in a good mutual fund. New pants, new shoes, and a United States savings bond.
I want stock in a Fortune 500 company.
Help your kids save for their future and choose to save.
We're back to the Total Education with Neil Haley, and I'm with Dr. G and Vita, and now it's time for the Parent-Teacher Conference, which is my most wonderful time of the year because then it starts to get busier and busier in my business. Now, when you arrive at a Parent-Teacher Conference, please, parents, arrive 5 minutes beforehand. Do not show up late. That's a big problem, isn't it, Vita?
It's huge because teachers are really, really busy that day.
Yes.
They have about 30...
Most stressful time as
yes.
a teacher.
And you're looking at your clock going, okay, I have Mr. Jones at this time. And if they're 5 minutes late, it really sets back your conference and everybody else's. And the bottom line is you have less time to talk about your child. That's what it comes down to. So being on time is crucial.
So important to be on time. And again, I know you're going to take the parents' role and say that sometimes things happen. Sometimes we end up late, right?
That's true, and it's really terrific for a parent when a teacher can say, hey, they're not here, but you're here a little early. I'll pull you
That's
in,
great.
absolutely,
That's great.
rearrange my
Yes.
schedule. But this year, for the first time, my husband and I have to try and do parent-teacher conferences about 3 different kids in the same school. And I really, God bless the administrators who even make that schedule, but it's really a puzzle.
Oh, it's a challenge, but no, really the administrators don't make that schedule. That's the real thing. You really rely on the teacher. So that's a new secret. That basically what happens is we send out the reminders, okay, parent-teacher conferences. Certain districts eliminated them, which I'm disappointed at. But I like the scheduled conference for everyone. But here's the block of time. This is when you're available. You put your name in. The teachers do it, not the administrators.
Okay.
And they might say this is the time that the day of conferences. But Vita, isn't a lot of work for the teacher?
It's a lot of work, and it's necessary. And if the key is for parents to get back to the teachers of when they're available, because you get the better spots first. If you respond in a timely manner, then teachers put you in. It's more flexible time of when you can come rather than when there's spots available.
Well, give our audience the secrets. What are the better times?
It depends on your schedule.
Exactly.
It depends on your parent's schedule. I know that there were times where I could only meet at 7 in the morning or 7:30. So when that parent, sign up for conferences came out, I would put in the earliest spot, or I would sort of tell the teacher, I know parent-teacher conferences are coming up. What's your earliest spot? And that sort of gives teachers the clue, oh, she would really like an early parent-teacher conference. Let me see what I could do.
So I would think as a parent that I'm going to get the teacher's freshest perspective and most energy if I'm one of the first conferences of the day.
Oh, sure, that's true too. But sometimes what schools do is they'll have parent-teacher conferences early in the morning, then there'll be a break in the middle, and then there's parent-teacher conferences in the evening. So that can actually go both ways. If you're one of the first conferences in the evening, teachers have had a minute to take a breath and relax.
And are on their best.
Exactly.
It takes time. I mean, you go through 25 to 48 conferences, trust me, and you're going boom, boom, boom. That's why I love meetings, because, again, it was like, okay, this is perfect, and everything's time. Let's get through. Let's pace. Because pacing is important, teachers. And if you're not pacing the conferences, a lot of parents are getting difficult.
Teachers pace all the time. They best be pacing parent-teacher conferences as well.
Oh, that's another story for another time, another place,
topic.
pacing and understanding it. But okay.
Different topic.
So let's go specifically. Now we show up. When we arrive, I think the key component is to make sure that you are here as a parent in a very nice way. Even if you're upset with the teacher, don't let them see it.
So you're saying this isn't the time for an argument?
Oh, no.
You don't have time.
Right.
You and the teacher do not have time. If you feel that there's a need for a longer conversation than 10 minutes, say that up front. Say, I'm concerned about certain issues. When is another time we can schedule a meeting? Because then that gives that teacher that moment to breathe and go, okay, we're just going to touch upon a few topics, and then we'll reschedule for another time when we can really delve into the issues that are at hand. So if you say that up front, it lets the teacher know that you're aware of things that are going on, and you want more time with that teacher. And you're not going to monopolize that time.
And as a parent, if I hear something I am very surprised by, that I want a minute to process, or I think I'm not going to be able to handle in my 5 meaty minutes of the conference, maybe any time in there I could just stop and say, hey, I feel really pressured for time, and I know you've got other parents to talk to. Can we get out our calendars and find another time to meet?
Teachers will love you for that, because you acknowledge the real situation at hand, and you want to talk further about what's going on. Teachers will say, oh, thank you so much for doing that. And the scheduling that time it just relaxes the situation.
And if you're in this mode where you're already aggressive and ready to argue, the teacher's going to really not be able to explain what's going on. And it becomes a angry situation sometimes. Police get involved. Trust me, I've been there. I've seen it. We both, and I both have seen this. Yes. Or they had someone like me that had to sit in meetings.
All of a sudden,
shout out to you guys at St. Agnes when the St. Agnes was still open. Now they're at St. Benedict. Where I had to sit in meetings because they were so concerned about what could happen. It becomes very, very heated. So as the parent, even though you have disagreements with this teacher,
bring a bouncer? Is that what
you got to bring me out. But no, just to kind of really keep it calm and be prepared. If you have those questions, you're ready to go. So then once we're ready, this conference begins. The first thing is allow the teacher to be the first one to speak. Don't you dare say the questions. You want them to open up. So do you have any questions? In a way, I'm sorry to tell you this, you are prepared, and that teacher might not think you will be. And then you will catch them off guard, but it'll be best so that the whole year will continue to become better. If a situation where you're just sitting and letting the teacher direct the whole entire thing and then give you 1 minute to talk, and Vita, it's happened.
Absolutely. I've had parents say to me, I came to my child's conference and the teacher kind of had a script and I had 1 minute to ask questions. Yeah. Absolutely. And they did not feel that they had a real parent-teacher conference, but the teacher had to get X, Y, and Z out. So let them talk first, but if you see they're going on and your issues aren't being met, it's okay to come in there and interrupt and say, I have some questions about X, and be really specific about them. Because then the teacher starts to hear you as they're concerned about their child too. Let's talk.
So how do you approach, do you do what we were talking about, or do you already start and lead the conversation when a parent-teacher conference?
Honestly, at a parent-teacher conference, I feel like a guest in somebody else's house.
Sure. And in a way you are, because the classroom is the teacher's home.
Right, exactly.
And you're walking into their home, and absolutely, that is definitely the feel walking in as a parent.
So I'm going to sit in this tiny little chair, or that's a nice thing about having older kids, in an actual chair.
Yes.
And I'm going to introduce myself, say hello, and then wait to hear how they open.
Exactly.
Yes. And then waiting to hear you have a response, and if they're addressing your concerns from the bat, fantastic. You can agree with, yes, I've had these concerns. Or if you're not hearing what you were hoping to hear, you bring that up. And sometimes it's hard to be the first one to bring it up, but just do it.
Just do it. But the thing is, if you have your questions, allow them to speak. But if there's a time concern, that's an issue. And a lot of times teachers are trying to rush through it so that they can get into small talk. And small talk is not the time in parent-teacher conferences. Allow it to volunteer in your classroom. That's when it's time for small talk, not during a parent-teacher conference.
Exactly, that's
a good tip.
I mean, because honestly, that's the time. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'd love to talk to you about that outfit or that situation or a great activity. Let's talk about that later. The important thing is Johnny or Susie right now. It's not our social lives. Because, again, sometimes in smaller schools, the relationship between the teacher and the parent is almost like friends or colleagues. For example, I'll go now to St. Mary's and I get hugs for my teachers because I taught there for so many years.
Well, and we're in Pittsburgh, so you could spend the entire 10 minutes talking about where you grew up and who you all both know.
Absolutely, but that's not the purpose of the conference.
No.
Also, when a parent comes in, please turn off your cell phones, because we've been in I've been in many meetings. You're right there, you're about to share the thing that's most important and a big concern to you as a teacher in the classroom, and the parent's phone rings and they go to answer it. And they're like, hi, I'm at a meeting right now, this isn't good. And really, it just shouldn't be on. For that 10 minutes, give your child that respect of having that phone off so you can really have that conversation.
Exactly.
It strikes me that a parent-teacher conference has a lot of similarities to a well-child medical visit.
It really is. It's like a well-child medical visit.
You already should have it set up.
Yes. When I see kids in the office for a well visit, not a sick visit, I'm hoping that a parent comes with questions. I hope that they're coming in to consult another person on their kid's team. And very much like you're saying with the questions that I might have for my child's teacher, if a parent brings up a question to me that they have, I don't have to beat around the bush or lead them there. We can drop all of that and go directly to the concern about their weight or about their development or those things.
And the anxiety is there on the parent perspective and also on a teacher perspective, because it's sort of that elephant in the room that you must talk about. You can't leave that conference without talking about it, but it's hard to talk about. So if we can just go directly to those questions, conferences would be even more effective.
When we sit in these tiny little chairs, especially being 6'10", and they say, "Okay, we'd like you to sit down," and those things happen. But I think that the ultimate thing in this conference is then the process begins. We have the conversations, and we'll go into a little bit in the next segment because I didn't think the conference would go that long. But here comes the teacher. They throw out things that might upset you. This is when you, as a parent, allow them. I agree with the interrupting in a way. If time is working, you're going to have to pace as the parent.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Allow them to get everything out, because they're going to get it out in 3 to 4 minutes. Really,
they've been doing this since 7 o'clock in the morning, and if you're coming in at 4, it's sort of a rolling script. They have been doing this 25 times already, and the longer it is in the day, the faster they may be talking, and they may not recognize that this is the first time they're meeting you, but you've said this 25 times already. So that the teacher's rolling.
I would really like us to talk about the problem a parent has going into a conference if their biggest concern is a strained relationship between that teacher and their child.
That's a really great topic to talk about because that exists. Let's bring that to the table as well.
And then those questions need to be asked. If that's a question you're really concerned about, you have to bring it up, and then that's maybe when you have to shoot an email to the principal or the vice principal or another teacher saying that you might have a great relationship from the year before. I want you to sit in this
Absolutely.
conference.
Or if your partner can come, please bring them along just so there is somebody else in the room for comfort's sake for you, and the teacher may have somebody else in the room for that component of making things a little bit more comfortable because there is that tension.
Is it good to give the teacher a heads up? Just like I get a heads up from looking at the online gradebook beforehand, I want to address this because my child is saying you don't like her, or she's saying she doesn't like you.
In the most positive way. This is where you can bring it up. I mean, we can talk about anything, but it really has to be in the most positive way, talking about the education and not the person. So making it in a way to help the child, sort of in a way putting it on the child but making it positive at the same time. My child is struggling with when it gets really loud in the classroom because she's sensitive to noise, rather than saying, you scream at my child all the time and she comes home really nervous. So you're saying the same thing but really spinning it in a positive way so the teacher has that opportunity to hear you.
Question format too.
Absolutely.
That's where I'm successful when I do meetings, is always asking questions. So the next part in the segment, this is what roundtable discussions. We are going to go a little bit further into this segment, which will lead to follow-up as well. Now it's time to ask those questions. Ask Dr. G. No, that we're going to have to ask these questions now. How do we ask them? And what should be our response when the teacher answers them? When we get back, that's going to be the hardest part. Teachers, teachers and parents. Parents, you're putting the teacher in the hot seat now. How do you ask those questions? We'll be back in just a moment.
The American Legion honors our newest generation of warriors and veterans. Please join us in supporting and recognizing their unique contributions and needs. Go to legion.org/honor veterans to find out more.
We're going now to the part of the conference that I think I really am very successful, that I see that parents that have this, it's really great, is asking the questions. Now, I love the parents that have a binder this big of stuff and all their class work, and they bring, well, I'm used to the IEP meetings and stuff, but I see it, but they have all their stuff in the row, they're ready to go. A lot of times they just throw them at the teacher. That's wrong. Ask a question. And the biggest thing that parents forget about is taking notes. This is right here. And if you were providing tips in the doctor's office, I think the white coat syndrome, same thing, take notes. And if you take notes...
And ask the teachers to stop. If they're going quickly, you can say, wait, I didn't quite get that. Could you please repeat what you said?
Exactly.
It's okay to have the teacher stop and repeat themselves because you want to hear what they're saying and get it down. So as you're taking notes, it's okay to ask the teacher to repeat what they're saying.
Don't you think some parents regress, though? We walk into a classroom, whether it's a second grade classroom or a 10th grade classroom.
You go back to what
we feel like students again.
Yes, absolutely. Where just walking into a school building will bring back memories.
A little post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely.
I agree.
That's probably walking into a building
that's one of the issues. So
there's a high school smell. It's not so good.
So Dr. G, when you ask that question, you take notes, listen to the teacher explain things, then you might say something like, okay. A lot of times if you have the right questions, they're going to answer them for them and everything is calm again. If you don't have the right question, it's very vague, it doesn't happen that way. So give me an example of a question you would ask at a parent-teacher conference once you said, do you have any questions? Because this is the same thing like anything. On the witness trial, do you have any questions? Anything, do you have any questions after an explanation of 20 minutes? But do you have any or a teacher, do you have any questions? Now you have to ask the questions.
So I really would like us to focus in on a parent who may come in with their own set of emotions. They're already angry, frustrated, upset by what they perceive to be how the teacher's treating their child.
Yes.
So let's say I find a way, and I'm trying to think of a way that I would positively spin that. Let's say that I go in, I'm worried about my daughter keeps coming home in tears and says that it's because of the way the teacher's correcting her, right? So can I be clear about the problem, but put it on my child by saying, what does Sarah need to do differently for you to let her know how she's doing in a way that doesn't make her cry on the school bus?
So absolutely, yes. First of all, this is really important. The teacher needs to know this, that you're aware of it and that it's happening. The teacher may not even realize it's going on. And in some cases, it may be happening. And in some cases, it may be the child's perception. And someplace in the middle, the two will meet. So knowing that that's coming home to you is really important for the teacher to know. Spinning it in a positive way and saying that this is happening with your child, you will go much further with that teacher in that conference rather than saying, Sarah comes home and she's crying every day and it's because of you. So if we start out with that, you're not going anywhere.
How can she switch classrooms is not as good a question.
Exactly.
Maybe for the principal, sure, not for the teacher. However, saying Sarah's coming home and she's crying every day, she seems really stressed about school. Could you please? Can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me more about that? What can we do as a team to help her? And the teacher may say, sometimes it gets noisy in here. Maybe I'll try to find a quiet spot for Sarah. And in the teacher's mind, she might be saying, oh, maybe I am raising my voice a little too much. I'm going to try to tone that down because it must be affecting some other students as well. So spinning it in a positive way, bringing it as we're both concerned about our child, because for that year it's the teacher's child also. How can we both help? And sometimes the teacher may say, and a teacher friend that this happened to, the grandmother came in and she said pretty much just that. And the teacher said, I am so glad you said that because he's crying in here all the time too, and let's work together to figure this out. And this teacher never raised her voice in her life in the classroom. However, the perception that the child had was that it was very loud, and they worked together. Making it a positive statement really will take you much further.
That's such a great point, and I guess every question needs to be pointed in a way that's very positive, even to the teacher, even if you're upset, because you're going to get the answer you want, and then you go to the next question. And I believe a parent needs to have a poker face. They shouldn't show that they're upset. I'm not going to bring anything up about yesterday. That you have to have that face that you're okay with everything. I'm fine with things, because if they know you're upset, they're either going to go on the attack and say you don't know what you're talking about, which will end the conference right there, or they're going to say something so hurtful that you're going to, because you don't want to hear this about your child, that you end up in tears and nothing gets accomplished. A meeting, there always has to be something that gets accomplished.
That makes sense to me. I do feel as a parent that I don't want to have a poker face. I do want that to be a space where honesty is okay if I can give honesty without attacking.
Yes.
But that's very difficult as a parent. When you say, we all want to just get up and just go right across.
We have that lion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
protect the cubs.
I just can imagine the first real conference where I disagree with the teacher. And you saw that face.
Homeschooling. I think that's the outcome. Homeschooling.
All the time.
Because I want to. No, but that's the thing. They want to attack. So the key thing is that you have to have that poker face so you get through the entire answers. Then you're already, when you're taking notes, you're coming with a follow-up question.
Okay. I wonder if that poker face might be more of a dad's resource than a mom's.
Sometimes you may not come up with that question until after the conference, and then we'll talk about that a little later.
We're really close to that. That was a great segue as I was going on that we want to go through this. Now, finally, questions are asked. The teacher hopefully provides some suggestions. The way we want to end this is you've gotten the information, and I want to ask Vita that question. What do we do next as a parent? After we've asked the questions, the teacher provides suggestions. What's the next step?
So with a child who's struggling in some way, you always want to have follow-up, because you're never going to have time in those 10 minutes to get all the questions answered and addressed. And in what I do now, I do what I do now because I always knew as a teacher, I'm going to give you these great suggestions and you're going to go home and you're going to earnestly try to do this. But because I haven't had enough time to spend with you to show you how, what, and why, you're going to come back frustrated. And then we're still going to be in this circle. So you always want to follow up from the parent perspective and the teacher perspective. As a parent, parents should take this on them to follow up with the teacher saying, I'm trying this and I'd like to come in and talk to you further about what's going on at home. Teachers will have the best of intentions of following up, but unless they hear back from the parent, not hearing back from the parent is sort of a code for everything's okay.
Exactly.
And it's not, because 6 to 9 weeks later, the parents are going to come back frustrated because Susie still does not know her addition facts. And there could have been many things that could have been done in that time period for her to learn her facts and for there to be less frustration. So it's really now the job of that parent to follow up. No, we are all very busy as parents, no question about that. But a quick email saying, hi, Mrs. Jones, I'd really like to talk to you more about Susie's addition facts. Please get back to me by. Gives that teacher that avenue to be more effective out of the classroom.
And that's close to where we are in that follow-up process. And that's a great point. But to close everything, make sure you give your information, any other extra contact information, any ways that you can reach them, especially let's say your child has a behavior problem and you as a parent, if you inform me, it ends. But if you're not telling me, it will continue. So you better text me, and I text parents all the time. Johnny's messing around in class, somebody else, and then stops. So really, if you create that relationship at the end of the conference, everyone now understands we're on the same page. We have a game plan in place. What do we do next? Here's some extra contact information. You can feel free to call me anytime, as the teacher would say, the parent would say, when's the best time to reach you, and a plan of action. Let's follow up in a couple weeks and see how things are going. Feel free to contact me every time. If that's how the meeting ends, what a successful parent-teacher conference. So I'll put you on the spot, Dr. G. How many of those have you had, and what would you say your most successful parent-teacher conference was? What happened? What do you think you did to prepare and the teacher did to prepare to make it a success?
The most successful parent-teacher conference that my husband and I had was when we came to school with a specific concern that our child, who was doing fine academically, didn't seem to have the friendships and the social skills we wanted him to have at that point. So I sent an email beforehand to the teacher. I got the scariest email back, which was, oh, good, I'm glad you mentioned that. Can you come in 45 minutes early for your first appointment?
Do you know what they were saying as they were reading it? We really wanted to talk to them about it, but we didn't know how.
But now they want an hour instead of 10 minutes.
And that's okay, because there's much to talk about.
Yes.
So the teacher, as she's reading this email, is going, thank goodness. Oh, I'm glad. That's a great parent. Thank you so much for doing this. And we really need that time to talk.
How about you, Vita? Most successful parent-teacher conference as a teacher or as a parent? What
From
happened?
a teacher perspective, really having a plan of action and connecting with the parent when there's a struggle going on, and knowing that we are all on the same team. Especially if the parent has come in with a little bit on the defensive about their child. A successful conference for me is when the parent and I walk out of the classroom and the parent feels, and I feel, that we are on the same team and we know what we're doing. From a parent perspective, one of my most successful conferences with a teacher has been when a teacher really acknowledged the concern that I had about my child, rather than saying, he's doing great, everything is wonderful. Absolutely, the teacher acknowledged the positives that my son had, but also said, here's an area where he really needs a little bit of support. It made me know that I wasn't crazy about this, that really there was something that he needed some help with, and that she knew it as well and was willing to work with me on the same team to have him accomplish that.
So the next part, before we finish, is the follow-up, which was supposed to be a segment. But after the conference is over, parents get together, go over everything together, first as parents, the couple, then talk to the child. Go over what information was gathered, look at what has happened, conversate, was this exactly what we wanted in this meeting? Then go to the child and say, here's what happened, everything's going this way and everything's going great. and then tell about the plan of action. Then always remember you got to follow up.
Absolutely.
You can't, and even a week later, I'd say it's just like any interview. Send an email to that teacher saying, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really think that my concerns were answered. I look forward to having a great working relationship with you this year. I think
and
that
if
a
you're
parent's able to
concerned
do that.
and you want another meeting set up, I'm available to meet on Thursday at 3. Might you be available? In that thank you email, set up that future time to meet if you still feel it's necessary.
Exactly. And once you see all that has happened, everything is perfect. And in a way, but I think that's why I like every 9 weeks having a parent-teacher conference. Even if your child, if it's not mandatory, go.
It's a process.
Go.
It is not
Go.
it is not a beginning or end point. It's a step along the way. A lot of times parents see conferences as we're going to find out what we're doing, how our child is doing up to this point, and then then they'll do something for 9 weeks and then we'll find out again.
It's not a report card.
It's not a report card. It's a process along the way of how things are going. And in September, things may be going really, really well. And by the time we get to March, things may not be going as well. But if we get to March and we don't know things have taken a turn for the worse, that's a problem. So it's a process, and keeping that door of communication open is so important.
So in 30 seconds, how would you, what you've learned, but also what you've has successful as a parent, how can you end up continuing to do that well? What recommendations would you give parents about being successful at the parent-teacher conference?
I think that in follow-up, the answer is to talk to your partner like you suggested. And I would say for any child over the age of 8, when you go back to that child, include them in developing that plan of action. Say to them, I asked you beforehand what you thought I would hear. Here's what we did hear, and what we were really impressed by, what we were proud of you about, what surprised us in a good way, and here are the things that you need to work on. And go into it with the expectation that there will be things to work on, that no child has no area in which they could improve, and then say, what do you think we could do? How could you get better supported?
Absolutely.
If you incorporate your child, you build that resilience in them, that sense that they're responsible for being responsible and stepping forward in their own education, that it's not something a medicine you give them, that it's their path and you're just there to guide them.
See, that's the great parent educator in you, explaining and then understanding and learning from it. As parents, we all have to learn. And we're going to learn from other colleagues, we're going to learn from everyone, but involve that child, that's the key. So in 30 seconds, what would you say in a wrap up for how to have success as a parent in a parent-teacher conference?
So obviously having that door open, knowing that you can feel comfortable speaking to that parent about whatever issue is going on in the classroom, that you can pick up the phone and call and say, Johnny had a great day today. A lot of parents would always be surprised when I would call. I go, no, this is a really good phone call I'm calling you about because he had a really great day. And I had a parent who rewarded her child with SpongeBob and said, you got to watch SpongeBob. And she would go, great, I'm watching SpongeBob. But really having that door of communication open, so when there is a problem or if there's a continued issue, you can always talk to that parent and know that the parent will be receptive to what you have to say.
Okay, websites to find more information.
For me, askdrg.com, askdoctorg.com.
Homeworks, educationalconsulting.com, all one word.
Okay, and totaltutor.net for me. And remember, you can listen to my radio show 7 days a week at the website. You can hear it in Pittsburgh on Fridays at 4:30 on 88.3 FM in Pittsburgh. Just a really, really good show. I thought that we really were able to cover a lot of things in parent-teacher conferences and what to do as a parent. Well, Vita, we're going to have to follow up on the radio on what to do as a teacher. But I appreciate everyone watching the show. Look forward to talking to you very soon. Good day, everyone.
This looks like hide and seek, but it's not. Kids often withdraw when their needs aren't being met. It would be easier if they said, I need a little one-on-one time. But it's up to us, their parents, to learn their language. And once you figure it out, you don't really have to say much at all. A thought from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.